Hey, welcome to my channel. This is where I share my thoughts, my creativity, and the things I'm passionate about. If you want to see more real and original content, make sure to subscribe and be part of the journey.
She built a app. My son built a career. Richard Calloway said it loud enough for the entire table to hear, his crystal glass raised toward the ceiling like he was toasting his own brilliance. 14 people, board members, senior partners, their perfectly dressed spouses, all turned to look at me. Some with pity. Most with that particular brand of polished amusement that wealthy people use when they don't want to seem cruel but absolutely are. My husband, Ethan, stared at his plate. I kept my face still. After 3 years of these dinners, I had learned that reacting was exactly what Richard wanted. But what none of them knew, what I hadn't even fully processed myself yet, was that I was already 4 moves ahead of him. And the man sitting at the far end of that table, the quiet one in the charcoal blazer, who had said almost nothing all evening, was about to change everything. 6 months earlier, I was sitting cross-legged on our apartment floor surrounded by spreadsheets and cold coffee, trying to figure out how to make payroll for the 3rd month in a row. My platform, Groundline, was a property data aggregator I'd built from scratch after 7 years in commercial real estate. The idea was simple. Give mid-sized developers the same market intelligence tools that only billion-dollar firms could afford. The execution had taken 2 years of my life, most of our savings, and more sleepless nights than I could count. Ethan walked in, loosening his tie. His father had given him that tie. I notice things like that now. Dad's hosting the quarterly dinner Thursday, he said. Not asking. He wants us there. I have a pitch Friday morning. I need Thursday night to prepare. Maya. His voice carried that careful, practiced patience, like he was managing me. It's not optional. I looked up at him then, really looked, and thought about the man I had married 4 years ago. The one who used to stay up with me sketching product roadmaps on napkins, who believed in Groundline before it had a single user. That man had been slowly replaced, one family dinner at a time, by someone who relayed his father's opinions as if they were his own and called it perspective. Fine, I said. I'll be there. Richard Calloway had built his fortune in commercial real estate development across the Midwest, the kind of success that gets your name on buildings and your face in regional business magazines. He was charming to clients and devastating to everyone else. From the first time Ethan brought me home, Richard had sized me up with a single glance and apparently decided I was a problem to be managed, not a person to be known. That Thursday, he greeted Ethan at the door with a handshake that became a half-hug. He looked at me and said, "Still at it with the data project?" Groundline closed its seed round last quarter, I replied. We're at 4,000 active users. He turned back to Ethan. Come see what we've done with the Meridian proposal. I followed them inside and spent the first 40 minutes of that evening nodding at conversations I wasn't included in, refilling my own wine glass, and watching Ethan transform, the way he always did inside his father's house, into someone I barely recognized. Quieter. Smaller. Eager. At dinner, Richard talked about the Calloway Group's upcoming expansion into the Nashville market. He talked about the new development partners he was courting. He talked about how the real estate industry was being flooded with amateur tech people who've never held a shovel or closed a deal trying to disrupt a business they didn't understand. He looked at me when he said it. Groundline is built by someone who spent 7 years doing deals, I said. Processing data for other people's deals, Richard corrected gently. There's a difference, sweetheart. Ethan said nothing. I drove home alone that night because Ethan stayed to review contracts with his father. I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes before starting the engine, not because I was crying, I was done crying over Richard Calloway, but because I was trying to remember why I kept going to those dinners. The answer, of course, was Ethan. And I was beginning to understand that Ethan might not be reason enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Hand-delivered to our building. My name written in careful block letters on a cream envelope. Inside was a single note card. Maya. You don't know me, but I knew your mother. My name is Victor Hale. I've been following what you've built with Groundline, and I think you deserve to know who I am. If you're willing to meet, I'll be at the Linden Cafe on Michigan Avenue Thursday at noon. I'll recognize you. You have her eyes. My mother had died when I was 11. A car accident on a February morning, the kind of loss that reshapes every year that comes after it. My father had raised me alone, quietly and steadily, and had passed away himself 3 years into my marriage. I had no siblings. I had a handful of cousins I barely knew and one aunt in Arizona who sent Christmas cards. I read the note 4 times and put it in my desk drawer. I took it out and read it again. I didn't tell Ethan. Victor Hale was in his early 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of unhurried stillness that comes from either great confidence or great discipline. He stood when I walked in, which I hadn't expected, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "You really do have her eyes," he said. We sat. He ordered tea. I ordered nothing because my hands weren't quite steady and I didn't trust myself with a cup. He explained, carefully, who he was. My mother's older brother. A structural gap in our family history that no one had ever explained to me. He and my mother had grown up close, but a falling out in their late 20s, something serious, something that involved money and a man and a broken promise, had severed the relationship before I was born. When she died, Victor had tried to reach my father. My father, in his grief and his protectiveness, had not wanted the connection reopened. "I should have tried harder," Victor said. "I didn't. I've carried that." "Why now?" I asked. "Because I saw your name in a trade publication last fall. Groundline. I started reading about what you'd built." He paused. "And because I recently learned something that I think you need to know," he told me then. Victor Hale had spent 30 years building a real estate investment firm from a single office in Indianapolis. In the mid-90s, he had taken on a business partner for a major development project in Cincinnati, a man with capital and connections and an appetite for risk. They had built something significant together. And then that partner had maneuvered Victor out of the company using a contract clause that Victor's own lawyer, unbeknownst to him, had been paid to overlook. The partner's name was Richard Calloway. I sat very still. "Your father-in-law," Victor said. "My father-in-law," I repeated. The universe, it turned out, had a very specific sense of humor. We met 3 more times before I let myself fully trust him. I needed to be sure he wasn't using me to reopen a 20-year grudge. But the more time I spent with Victor, the more I understood that revenge wasn't actually what he was after. Accountability was. There was a difference, though I wouldn't fully appreciate that distinction until much later. What Victor had, and what Richard had never anticipated him holding on to, were documents. Original contracts, correspondence, wire transfer records, and a signed letter from Richard's lawyer, now deceased, that described the arrangement in explicit terms. Victor had kept everything in a storage unit in Indiana for 2 decades. Not sure what to do with it, not willing to destroy it. "Why not use this before now?" I asked during our 3rd meeting. "I had enough to survive," Victor said. "I rebuilt." But Richard never faced any of it. He went on to become exactly the kind of man that letter suggests he was. He looked at me steadily. "And then I found out his son married my niece. And that my niece built something real that he's been quietly undermining for years." I hadn't told Victor about the dinners, the comments, the way Richard spoke about Groundline in front of Ethan's colleagues like it was a weekend hobby. But apparently word traveled in this industry. Victor had heard things. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already felt the shape of an answer forming. "I'm suggesting," he said, "that I've been looking for a reason to move my investment portfolio into the data intelligence space. And I think Groundline is exactly the kind of platform I want to anchor that move." The investment changed everything. Not immediately, and not loudly, because Victor was deliberate in the way he operated. He came in as a silent limited partner through a holding company, which meant his name didn't appear in any of our public filings. We used the capital to expand our data licensing agreements, hire 3 engineers, and begin development on the enterprise tier that mid-market developers had been requesting for 2 years. Groundline's user base doubled in 90 days. I told Ethan we'd secured a private investor. He asked who. "A firm that specializes in proptech," I said. "They saw the Q3 numbers and reached out." He nodded. And then he said, "Dad thinks you should use the capital to pivot toward residential. Commercial is too competitive for a platform your size." I looked at him across our kitchen table. "Dad thinks," I said quietly. "He has 30 years of experience in this market, Maya. Does he have an opinion about what color to paint the office, too?" The fight that followed was the worst one we'd had. Ethan slept in the guest room. In the morning he was gone before I woke up, and I sat at our kitchen table drinking coffee and understanding, with a clarity I had been avoiding for months, that my husband had stopped being my partner somewhere along the way. He had become his father's project. I wasn't angry. I was grieving. The strategic part of what Victor and I began doing next happened slowly and methodically, and I want to be honest about the fact that some of it troubled me. We weren't manufacturing harm. Everything we did used real leverage and real relationships. But I was operating with information that came from my personal connection to Victor, and there were moments late at night when I wondered whether the line I was walking was as clean as I wanted it to be. The first move was the Henderson Data Partnership. Richard's firm, Callaway Group, had been in exclusive talks with Henderson Analytics for 8 months, trying to integrate their market projection tools into Richard's development pipeline. It was a deal he'd been publicly discussing at industry events. What he didn't know was that Henderson's founder was an old friend of Victor's, and that the exclusivity conversation had never actually been formalized. Victor made one phone call. Henderson Analytics became Groundline's first enterprise partner instead. I heard about Richard's reaction secondhand, through Ethan, who came home looking like he'd survived something. Henderson pulled out of the Callaway discussions, he said. That's too bad, I replied. They announced a partnership with some data platform. He looked at me. Groundline. I held his gaze. Henderson reached out to us 6 weeks ago. I didn't mention it because you've made it clear you don't want to discuss my business. Something shifted in his expression. Not suspicion exactly, more like a door opening that he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through. The second move was the Carver building. Richard had been positioning to acquire a historic office complex in downtown Cincinnati, the same city where he'd ruined Victor 30 years earlier, and converted into high-end mixed use. The acquisition depended on a zoning variance that required community support. Victor quietly connected me with 3 neighborhood development organizations who had long-standing grievances about Callaway Group's track record on community benefit agreements. I didn't tell them what to do. I simply introduced myself, explained what Groundline's platform could offer them in terms of data transparency, and listened. 2 of those organizations formally submitted opposition letters to the zoning board. The Carver acquisition stalled. Ethan didn't mention it to me this time. I found out from a real estate news alert and felt the simultaneous satisfaction and discomfort that had become my constant companions. Victor and I met weekly. The business conversations were real and substantive. He understood commercial real estate at a level that made every session valuable, and slowly, carefully, we were also building something that surprised me. An actual relationship. He had known my mother before their estrangement, during the years she was most herself, before illness and loss had softened and shortened her story. He told me things I had never known, small specific things, that she had played piano badly and joyfully, that she had an instinct for people that was almost unsettling, that she had wanted to start a business herself but had set it aside when she got pregnant and then hadn't found her way back. You finished what she started, he told me once. I had to look away when he said it. 3 months in, Ethan came home with news that landed like a stone. Dad wants me to take over the Nashville expansion, he said. Fully. I'd be relocating there for 18 months, maybe 2 years. Us, I said. You mean us relocating? He was quiet long enough that I had my answer. He thinks it would be better for my focus if I went alone, Ethan said finally. No distractions. I heard my own heartbeat for a moment. I'm a distraction. That's not what I said. That's what he said. And you're repeating it. He didn't deny it. He just stood there looking tired and guilty and, underneath both of those things, tempted, which was the worst part. He wanted to go. He wanted his father's approval more than he wanted our life. I went to bed that night and didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and decided something. Whatever happened next, however this ended, I was going to stop apologizing for being exactly who I was. The New York event was Richard's idea, which should have told me something. He called it an industry forum, a gathering of Midwest and East Coast development firms at a rooftop event space in Midtown Manhattan. In reality, based on what Victor was hearing from his own network, it was a damage control operation. Richard's last 2 quarters had been rough. The Henderson loss, the Carver stall, and a materials cost overrun on a project in Columbus had combined to make certain board members nervous. This event was designed to project confidence. Victor had been invited as a technology and investment partner. Ethan told me 2 weeks before that his father had specifically requested I attend. Why? I asked. He said it looks better if spouses are present. More stable. Ethan paused. And honestly, I think he wants to keep an eye on you. It was the most honest thing my husband had said to me in months. I said I would come. The night before we flew out, I had dinner with Victor. He walked me through the final piece of what we had prepared, a detailed presentation of the original Cincinnati documents, packaged and formatted for the board members who would be attending the New York event. Not a public ambush. A quiet, private disclosure, delivered with precision. You don't have to be the one who does this, Victor said. I can handle the entire thing. He called my company a hobby in front of your business partners, I said. I want to be in the room. Victor smiled, just slightly. Your mother would have said the same thing. The event space was exactly what Richard would have chosen. Panoramic views, open bar, servers in all black. The kind of venue that signals you have already won before the conversation starts. Richard moved through it like a man who had never doubted himself for a single moment of his life, which, I had come to understand, was both his greatest strength and his most complete blind spot. He greeted Ethan with the warmth he reserved for his legacy. He looked at me and said, Maya. Try not to spend the whole evening talking shop. I'll do my best, I said. The evening opened with cocktails and the low hum of deal conversation. I watched Victor work the room with the patience of someone who understood that timing was everything. He spoke to 3 board members separately over the course of an hour, unhurried, specific, laying a foundation. Richard called the group to attention around 8 o'clock. He stood at the center of the room, no podium, no notes. Just the absolute ease of a man who considered every room his room. The past year has tested a lot of us, he began. Supply chain pressure, regulatory headwinds, the usual noise from people who've never built anything trying to tell us how to build. A knowing laugh moved through the crowd. What I want you to take home tonight is this. Callaway Group is not retreating. We are repositioning. Nashville is the future of mid-market commercial development in this country, and we are going to own that market. Applause. He basked in it. Then his eyes found me in the crowd, and something sharpened in his expression, that same instinct he'd had at dinner months ago, the sense that something wasn't right that he couldn't quite locate. I also want to acknowledge the partnerships that anchor our strategy, he continued. Victor Hale and the Hale Capital Group have been invaluable in our data and technology integration work. He gestured toward Victor. Victor inclined his head, gracious. Victor is one of the few people in this business I trust completely, Richard said. And the warmth in his voice was genuine, which made what came next even more precise. He moved toward our part of the room, stopping near Ethan and me, addressing the small cluster of people around us. You know, success in this industry is about knowing who belongs in the room and who's just visiting. I've made mistakes in my career. His gaze settled on me. Tolerating distractions being one of them. The cluster laughed softly. Ethan looked at the floor, and I felt something go very quiet inside me. Groundline processed more commercial property transactions in the Midwest last quarter than any other data platform in its category, I said. My voice was even. We're signing our 4th enterprise client next week. I'd be happy to discuss whether that qualifies as a distraction. Richard's smile tightened. No need to pitch your app tonight, Maya. She's not pitching, Victor said. The room shifted. People turned. Victor walked toward us slowly, and he had that particular quality in this moment, the one I had only glimpsed before, of a man who has waited a very long time and has no interest in rushing now that the moment has arrived. Richard, he said, I'd like to introduce you to my niece. The silence was absolute. Richard's expression didn't break immediately. It moved through stages. First confusion, then a rapid and visible search for the word niece inside everything he knew about Victor Hale, and then, when it landed, something that wasn't quite fear but was adjacent to it. Your niece, he repeated. Maya is my sister's daughter, Victor said. I only found her recently. Long story, which we can discuss privately. He paused. Or publicly, if you prefer. Given that the story involves Cincinnati and a certain contract clause from 1994, every board member in the vicinity was now completely still. Richard's voice dropped. This isn't the place. You're right, Victor agreed. Which is why I've already sent the relevant documents to the board audit committee. Along with a brief letter from Howard Chen. He let the name land. You remember Howard. He was your lawyer at the time. He wrote the letter himself, a few years before he passed. I think he wanted it documented. Richard set down his glass. Ethan was looking at me. Not with betrayal exactly, though that was there. Mostly with the expression of someone who had been standing on ground he assumed was solid and was only now feeling it shift. You knew, he said quietly. About Victor. About all of it. I found out about Victor the same way you found out about Nashville, I said. From a letter that arrived when I wasn't expecting it. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. It isn't. Because I told you about my investor, and you asked me if it was real. Your father announced you were moving across the country, and you asked me to understand. Around us, the room had fractured into urgent whispers. 3 board members had moved together in a tight cluster near the windows. Richard stood alone in the center of the space he had commanded 20 minutes ago, and for the first time in the 3 years I had known him, he looked like a man who did not know what to do next. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt exhausted and sad and very clear, the way you feel sometimes after making a decision you've been circling for a long time. I excused myself and walked to the far end of the terrace. The Manhattan skyline was fully lit, all those windows, all those lives. I stood there and let myself feel the whole complicated weight of the past 6 months, what I had done and why, who I had become in the doing of it, and whether I was at peace with the answer. Victor found me 20 minutes later. How are you doing? He asked. Ask me tomorrow, I said. He stood beside me, looking out at the city. Ethan came to talk to me. I turned. He wanted to understand the Cincinnati history. What his father had done. Victor paused. He listened. Actually listened. He didn't defend him. I was quiet for a moment. That doesn't fix what's broken, I said. No, Victor agreed. But it might be where fixing starts. Ethan found me a few minutes later. We stood side by side without speaking for a while, which was more honest than most of our conversations had been in months. I didn't know who he was, Ethan said, finally. Not really. I knew he was difficult, and I told myself that was just how he operated. That results were what mattered. He stopped. I think I've been telling myself that for a very long time. You have. I kept waiting for you to just. He exhaled. Accept the way things were. And you wouldn't. I told myself it was stubbornness. It wasn't stubbornness. I know that now. He turned to look at me. Did you plan all of it? The Henderson deal, Carver, everything? Victor and I worked on it together. It was real business. Real leverage. Nothing manufactured. But you used his connection to Dad. Your father has spent 3 years trying to convince you that my work wasn't real, I said. He just called it a distraction in front of 40 people. And you stood there. Ethan flinched. I'm not saying that to hurt you, I continued. I'm saying it because it's the thing we have to actually talk about if there's anything left to talk about. He nodded slowly. I turned down the Nashville Post. I looked at him. I called him 20 minutes ago and told him I wasn't going, Ethan said. Not because of tonight. I made the decision 3 days ago and couldn't figure out how to say it. He paused. I've been so focused on what he thought of me that I stopped thinking about who I actually wanted to be. I didn't say anything for a long time. That's a start, I said finally. But it's a long way from enough. I know. I need you to know what I built. Not because you approve of it. Because it's real, and it's mine, and I spent 2 years of my life on it, and I need a husband who understands that without needing his father to tell him first. I want to, he said. And unlike so many things he had said in the past year, it didn't sound like something he was performing. It sounded like something he was asking for permission to mean. The flight home 2 days later was quiet, but a different kind of quiet than the one we'd been living in. Victor flew separately. We had agreed to have dinner the following week, the 3 of us, which still felt strange to say. My mother's brother. My father-in-law's oldest mistake. Arriving back into my life at exactly the moment I most needed someone who understood both real estate and inheritance and what it meant to lose people and still keep building. Richard Calloway's situation was being handled by his board and, eventually, his attorneys. The Cincinnati documents were serious, and the process would be long. Victor wasn't asking for money, he was asking for acknowledgement, and in lieu of that, accountability. What that looked like legally was still being determined. Groundline's 4th enterprise contract signed on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after New York. I was sitting at my actual desk, in my actual office, with 2 engineers and my operations lead gathered around my laptop. When the confirmation email came through, we made a lot of noise. My operations lead, Deja, opened a bottle of something that had been sitting in the mini fridge since our seed round closed, and we stood around my desk drinking out of mismatched mugs and talking about what the fall roadmap looked like. Later that afternoon, I sat alone for a few minutes after everyone had gone back to their desks. I thought about Richard Calloway calling my company a hobby. About every dinner where Ethan had stared at his plate. About a letter in a cream envelope and a quiet man with silver-streaked hair who recognized me by my mother's eyes. I thought about what I had done and the fact that I would make the same choices again, mostly, with a few adjustments. I thought about the parts of it that still scraped against something in me. The weeks of operating in shadows, the moments when strategy and honesty pulled in different directions. Dominic had never questioned his methods. That Victor had said that about someone else, in a different story, but I understood the point. The difference was that I knew I'd complicated things to get here. I knew what I'd traded and what I'd refused to trade. I could account for it. That felt like something. Groundline had 38 users when Richard Calloway first called it an app, like the word was a diminishment he could hand me like a consolation prize. It had 11,000 active accounts the morning Victor walked into that room in Manhattan and told 40 people exactly whose daughter I was. Not his daughter-in-law. Not a distraction. Not a woman who needed to understand the difference between processing deals and actually building something. My uncle's niece. My mother's daughter. My own person, standing in a room I had earned, with leverage I had built, and a name that Richard Calloway would spend a long time learning to pronounce correctly. His biggest mistake wasn't marrying his son to me. His biggest mistake was assuming that the room he walked into was ever really his to own.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I'm freezing, I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile, every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here, maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.